Oh, just because you got a jetpack, you think you're something special, and you're gonna stand in my way? Who do you think you are, Buzz Lightyear?
To infinity and beyond!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho, and today we are going to take a look at Alien Rage. This was created by CI Games, and it is a first-person hardcore style shoot-'em-up game. Literally very easy to die in this game, and much more playstyle designed for people looking for a challenge in their first-person shooters, available on PC. Now let's go into the options menu here, and we'll start with a simple gameplay. Aim assist, weapons, it's not much to really pick from in that category. We go to controls. Now you can rebind all the keys and have not had any issues in doing so, and you may need to rebind some keys because some are set into an inconvenient spot, but that just may be me. And you have what's really nice, sensitivity and aiming sensitivity. Aiming sensitivity is when you zoom in on a scope of your weapon and then you try moving around versus just moving around in any freestyle movement fashion. So having the difference in aim on both of those categories is really nice. And then some other gameplay control settings. When we go to video, you have gamma, anti-aliasing, as you can see, large variation of screen resolutions, which is definitely nice. And the graphic quality of this game is really, really beautiful. It has a lot of blue though. They've definitely went all out on the blue aesthetic. It doesn't mean that the game looks bad, but it is a lot of blue. Very nice and very important to see as you have a field of view slider, and that is lovely. The game has been running at 60 frames per second. I have not suffered any crashes during playing. I have not had any tearing or clipping. I have had some minor issues with the enemy forgetting that I'm there, or they get stuck targeting a wall or something, but the small AI hiccups have been really far and few in between. I think on my entire gameplay hours, I've ran into it twice, and it was over before it really impacted the game in any negative fashion. So really nothing to complain about overly in that regard. When it comes to sound options, you have all of what you need split up on different sliders, which is beautiful to see. The music in this game is very good. During the battle, it helps propel a sense of atmosphere and combat and adrenaline, where you're just continuously fighting and you're like, yes, 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 yes. And then when the fighting dies down, in the in-between, the music ties together very well to have this sort of high-strung tension and also anticipation for what's going to come next. The music is tied in very well into the game, and the sound effects are done also very well. When it comes down to the voice acting, it's decent. I have no issues with how the voice acting was done, and we'll get more into story in a bit. So let us jump back out to the main menu. Now, one thing that does bother me about perhaps not just this game, but also games in a first-person atmosphere altogether, is the driving sense to have a multiplayer mode. When you click on multiplayer, it'll bring up another load screen. It'll minimize actually a single player game as they run on separate applications. And what bugs me about it is a game like this, which has perhaps its own charm or creativeness, is not going to strive in a multiplayer fashion. A lot of games which make a FPS feel that they need to have a multiplayer fashion integrated into a game so they can compete with bigger companies or bigger game titles like Call of Duty or other large multiplayer first-person shooters, which is not the case. And so it annoys me when they waste this development time making extra maps and allowing servers and doing all this just annoyance. It would have been nicer just to have a simple co-op through the story, as the game is very fast-paced and aggressive. Having the availability to do it with a friend or two would have been much more enjoyable overall than a dead multiplayer arena, which is just going to cost or take effort to maintain servers. You have your statistics, which basically just show everything in your gameplay as you've gone through, and the perks and points that you have acquired, and of course leaderboards. Leaderboards are your points overall, so pretty much the only way really to continue to rise in your leaderboard score set is to continue to play and just not stop until you're at the top score. There's really nothing all that deep or intricate when it comes to the leaderboard system, and I'm not saying that's a failure because it's a first-person high-paced shooter game, but it's there for what it is, I guess. Now, when we come to the campaign of a game, you do have some choices to pick from. You can easily start a new game, or you can start a mission that you've already completed and pick up a story from there, or replay one of those missions. If the point value system does tie into the leaderboard on separate missions, which really doesn't show that that's the case, as it shows a overall score basis, then you could at least replay a mission that you might want to get a better score on. And there's a way there, but there's not really a what you have standing in a point versus what you possibly could get. So that's a bit frustrating. Now, as I said in the beginning, this game is very challenging, and it does have a different difficulty setting. And the difficulty in this game is actually carried out quite well. The challenging, or easy mode of the game is what I played it on, because I tried playing it on hard, and I was just getting killed too much that I wasn't really making progress for my time. So I scaled it back for my weaker senses, and I played it on challenging. But they do have a variety of difficulty in the game. As I stated, it is more of a hardcore style game, and it is meant to really challenge you in your gameplay. So let's talk about story first. A story is really one of the smaller objects in the game itself, as it's not something that's going to be driving you through the game. You're not going to be like, oh my goodness, what's happening next? Oh, I'm so excited. But what does happen in the story as it progresses forward has enough purpose or character to allow you to get through the game, and it makes sense. What you're doing and why you're there makes sense. It ties together. There are funny moments in the dialogue, which adds some humor moments. It holds itself together, but no, it's not going to win any RPG awards. It's not going to be Game of the Century in writing. It's not that style of game. It's very simplistic in its story, and that's perfectly fine. It does enough to tie the world together and motivate you through the game to push onward with understanding of what you're doing. And the voice acting as you progress through the game, whether it be your main character, your crewmates on your ship, which you have communication with through a radio, or the audio logs you pick up, are all done very well. It's really annoying when a game runs with a futuristic feel to it, and the audio is all like, and they're coming to get you. It's like, really? This is a fucking future, and that's what the audio sounds like? This game does not suffer from that at all. It does a really good job at the audio quality in the game, and I'll let you hear some of that for yourself right now so you can be a judge of it yourself.
I think we found the 21st. Fuel is some serious shit.
Puts our job into perspective, doesn't it?
Something fantastic happened today. I don't want to sound like a teenager finally getting an invite to the prom, but the Boris delegation offered their help with NX-01 development. Apparently they had quite a head start and have a much wider grasp of its capabilities. I think seeing that we were here first, they want to collaborate, splitting the output 50-50. That's a pretty good deal in my book. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to get the Nobel Prize for advances in nanoscience, but let's be realistic. Earth needs this sooner rather than later. Right, the Boris gave us one condition. The tech must be used solely for industrial development and not warfare. They couldn't, or wouldn't, explain why this was so important to them. We're waiting for an answer from UE Council. Let's hope this doesn't flop.
So let's talk about gameplay first, and how does it handle, how does it play? The weapons are actually done very nice, and the audio can even tie into this. Case in point, if you have a minigun and you continuously hold down the minigun, as the weapons do have a heat counter, so if you're not careful in your aim or your rate of fire, your barrels will overheat and you'll have to stop shooting, otherwise you melt your gun and backfire and kill yourself. But it automatically stops your gun from shooting. But something like the minigun ties into the combat because not only does it feel very heavy, and it is very satisfying, the character will voice out a battle cry tying in perfectly the feeling of the combat and the intensity of the combat, because you're holding a weapon down to try to kill mass amounts of enemies, and you're like, die, 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 and your character will cry out like, ah, and it just fits in perfectly. It's done so well. When it comes to the other weapons, I'd have to say my favorite is really the base machine gun that you start out with. It's simplistic in what it offers, but it handles very nice. And while the game does have different types of weapons, whether it be a sniper rifle, a handgun, or different types of alien weapons, and they have secondary rates of fire, which will tie into your grenade system, they sound powerful and they feel heavy. The recoil on the weapons isn't so much that it destroys any gameplay. Yes, there's recoil. Yes, you have to be careful of what you're shooting at and how you're shooting, but it's not to an insane amount or a stupid amount. And the weapons in the game are actually well balanced. At no point did I find myself frustrated because of how the weapons handled, and truthfully, I didn't find myself frustrated about the game at all. But when one does talk about frustration, it does have to come down to the enemies and the AI, which ties into the difficulty as well. As I said, the difficulty of the game is very well done. The level of damage the enemy will do to you, or the speed of how much they'll move around, and how much damage you can take, do increase on variable amounts based on your difficulty setting. But the AI handles that. If you're fighting one opponent and you kill one person, the rest will move. They will run, they will scurry, they will hunt, they will reposition. The AI is done very well in its game, and it offers a challenge that you may not see very often in a first-person shooter. The enemy that you end up fighting is truly one of note or of a challenge. And it ties into a different variety types of the enemies there are. As you progress through the story, you will be encountering different types of bosses, which have their own frustration tied to it, but it's fair at the same time. I didn't find that the bosses were using cheap tactics, or my struggles against them were unfair in any fashion. As this does tie into the fact that there are different types of enemies, there are some which are uncloaked and they get right up close to you and you have to take them out. Otherwise, when they touch you, they stun you. Or there's more ranged enemies or grenaders, which will probably be, if you do get this game or play this game, it'll probably be your primary cause of death are the grenaders, because they are blowing up everything in their path. The way the enemy handles themselves are done in a very strategic manner, and a very thought out and carefully scripted one at that. And this ties into the level design. While the level design in retrospect of the atmosphere is very large, and the atmosphere of the game is done very well. It has a sense of dread, or it has a sense of purpose. It has the feeling of an alien presence and environment of a sci-fi world really done down to a core. There are a lot of little details mixed in between everything, which really give it this sense of completion. You are on this facility. You are seeing what's happening. The environment is interactive with itself, and it's very alive, and it's very dreadful or scary or whatever the case is, because you see other warriors or other humans who have been killed, and you see battle scars and damage areas, and you see the enemy presence preparing for war. The level design and the gameplay style of it may be very simplistic, because it doesn't offer a variation or deviant from a linear standpoint as you basically go through corridor to corridor or room to room, fighting your way through these hordes of aliens. There are no second ways around. There is no A route and B route. And there's not even a jump. There's a tiny little skip, which when you press the spacebar, your feet go off the ground about 1.5 inches. So it's not really a jump. You're not really meant to interact or try to get places in your environment. And while usually I would say that this is a severe detriment to a game, because level design is prevalent to allowing the player to have choice, the way that this game has been designed negates those arguments in a fashion. This game is meant to be a hardcore, very linear path shooter, and the satisfaction that you get from how well the weapons handle and how enjoyable it is to see enemies go splat, as well as the fact that it's very knowledgeable of the fact that you get a headshot when you kill somebody. It ties it in to an aspect of, well, this is so much fun, I don't care that I'm going to be going down such a linear path. And so yes, while the level design looks fantastic and graphically is very impressive, it is very linear, but the way the combat handles really helps it not feel so drawn out. So at the end of the day, the game is very simple in its concept. There's really not all that much to talk about. Like I've said, you have different types of weapons which all handle very nice. You have a level design which, yes, is linear, but the atmosphere and the way the satisfaction you get from how the weapons handle kind of take away from any of the negative aspects of the game. It is a very difficult game. It is meant for more hardcore players. And so it does come down to a personal choice. Me, I'm somebody who enjoys a stronger story in my games. And I found myself bored if I tried playing for long periods of times because the game's story was a very low baseline storytelling. The story wasn't bad, and it fit the purpose of the game, but because it was so simplistic in what it had, it was hard for me to wrap up around it. But as I've said, this is not meant to have an enthralling, beyond all belief story or heart-touching moments. So just as if level design and going multiple routes may be a high deterrent for you, or a story is, then perhaps get this while it's on sale or some such. But for what the game is, for the base line of what the game is, upon how it handles, how you go room to room and shoot aliens of different types and fight against opponents that really are going to try to kill you in the utmost fair manner, but still a very aggressive way. It is a game meant for more hardcore first-person shooters, and that's not bad at all. It looks beautiful, it runs great, and I can easily recommend it, but you have to keep in mind that even on the easiest setting, it's going to be difficult. So you have to enjoy first-person shooters in the first place. Thank you everybody for listening, for having SocioPsycho, and I'll see you next time.